Good evening and welcome to the Board of Selectmen's meeting for November 23rd. The agenda tonight will have citizens input at 7 o'clock. 7:05 we have a public hearing on a dog issue. 7:30 there's a public hearing for an application for a Class 2 auto license at 24 Washington Street. And at 7:40 we have goals and objectives, but I don't believe we're going to do that this evening with two of our members absent. So do you want to lead us in the pledge, Lorraine?
Sure. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thanks. So the time being 7 o'clock, thereabouts. Is there any citizens input this evening? Okay, there being none, and it is 7:05, so we will start the dog issue hearing. So you want to come up?
I've got one.
You got one?
Sure. Is that an extra one? Thank you.
So, here we are again.
Again, this concerns dogs belonging to Juliet Wang of 23 Descents Drive, whom you issued a permanent restraining order to in December of '09.
Yep.
She was brought before you again in July due to the fact that the dogs continued to roam. At that time, conditions were added to the order. She's failed to comply with those conditions. The dogs are still roaming. I've cited her 6 times since. 2 neighbors have complained of the dogs attacking their dogs, in addition to other complaints. And on one occasion the dog owner was attempting to walk their dog. The second occasion, it happened in the dog's own yard. Currently, I have one of the dogs in custody since the 16th.
Since the 16th of November?
Yes.
And the folks on here tonight?
No, Mr. Costa, Juliet Wang's partner, called at approximately 6:45 to request that asking if the hearing could be rescheduled. When I replied not, he said he inquired about an appeal process.
Which goes to the courts, correct?
Yes,
Kevin?
he has 10 days to.
Magistrate hearing. It's a
Okay.
de novo hearing, meaning clerk magistrate hears the matter as if you had never taken your action. So he hears it fresh, if you will.
And we, I went back in our notes from July, and I distinctly remember him saying that he was going to fix the fence and that there were all these things going to be done. And
They have 3 means of containing these dogs.
Right.
They have an electronic fence. They had the fence company come out, however, and get the fence up and running again. However, the fence company stopped working with them halfway through the 14 training days, stating that there were 2 issues. One of the dogs was just too excited and unmanageable, and they were not able to work with it, and that the owner was not working with them to train the dog. So they refunded their money and said that the dog could not be at this time trained to the fence. anytime I've been there, the dogs aren't wearing collars anyways. Now I'm told that the fence has been cut, that is not working. One time it was because the outlet that it was plugged into was not working, I was told. Another time, Ms. Wang told me that children in the neighborhood had cut the fence. They have a perimeter fence. They were to fix the gates. It was done in a Mickey Mouse fashion by themselves. On one occasion that I did go, I was able to close the gates, but they've never been, the next day they were open. They do not keep them shut. At this point, I think they're off the hinges anyways. There is a kennel in the rear of the property, which works as long as they put the dogs in it, but for the most part, I think they don't. On one occasion that I went there because of a report of the dogs running at large, I went to the house, spoke with Ms. Wang. When I got halfway up the driveway leaving, the young male dog is behind me, follows me out into the cul-de-sac.
Sue, we met on July 13th. You issued a letter on July 15th. And you saying, and I'm looking through the tickets you just gave, 6 violations since the letter, since they sat at this table?
Yes.
The second time?
And there are other occasions the dogs have been out that according to statements by the neighbors. You'll see there is a statement there from one neighbor who is here tonight, and another neighbor is here as well. That neighbor, on the occasion that the 2 younger dogs went into that neighbor's yard on the 31st, 211 Descents, it was reported to me that the dog narrowly escaped injury. Speaking to Mrs. Bird's son, he said that when they moved in, which I believe was this summer, they made an attempt to introduce the dogs, but the dogs were aggressive, and it was apparent that that was not going to work.
So, I mean, I feel
Well,
I went,
yeah, I mean, the last statement that she signed off on in July was, that she would do all those things, or otherwise the dog would be banished, correct?
Correct.
And she signed that. So, is that what we have for this evening?
They asked that the animals be banished.
All of them. All of them.
All of them. And in addition, that they not be able to have other dogs own or harbor them in the town of Foxboro. There was a 4th dog, a golden retriever, that after I picked it up probably on the 11th time, they did not claim that dog. They went on to replace it with another shepherd. If there's every probability that if these dogs are simply banished, that they will just get other dogs. And history will repeat itself.
now, when they came in front of us last time, there was a long history before they even got here. Now there's continued. I've got to ask the question because I remember it clearly when they were here. And I also went back to the notes to the discussion. In our recommendation, it was clear that if you don't do X, Y, and Z, then the dogs will get banished. But when they came in front of us, it seems to me that they were pointing out that there were things that are out of her control. People taking the collars off the dog, several breaks in the neighborhood, the police not doing their job, and blaming everyone else. Any merit to any of that stuff that you've seen?
No. She's told me that there are 2 other German Shepherds that live on Summer Street that look just like her dogs. That's somebody opening the gate. I I think it's
Yeah.
failure on their part to close gates, put collars on, et cetera.
Okay. I figured as much, but I know that's what the topic was last time, and where they're not here, I didn't know if you had any of that information.
So, Sue, will you just tell us a little bit about banishment, what that actually entails, and what it means to the owners and the town?
It could take different forms. My recommendation would be that not ask that the dogs be surrendered to the town of Foxboro, but that the owner remove them from the town. And that they do have to notify animal control where they are placed within 24 hours of placement, and they have to notify the animal control officer in that town. Because, that they have the reason for not having them surrendered to the town is the cost that the town would incur in housing them and the difficulty in placing them. I have not had good luck with German Shepherd Rescue. It could take a considerable amount of time to find them housing. The owner in their interim could house them at their own expense at a private boarding kennel.
I see. And what is the timeline that they have for this?
I would like to say that the 29th being Monday, I did call a few kennels. They're not going to be able to get them into a boarding kennel sooner than that because of the holiday. The kennels are full. So
what would you put on for a timeline on this then?
That the dogs have to be off the property no later than November 29th. And that the dog Kaiser, who is in my custody now and being housed at Mansfield Animal Shelter, remain in custody at their expense, up with a time limit on that. How did I word that? But, okay, so the time limit being no longer than 10 days from this hearing
Okay,
date,
yeah.
or until all appeals are heard, or until the dog has been surrendered by the owner, whichever occurs first.
How long does the appeal process typically take?
Could take a month. They have 10 days to request it. The Rentham Court has been pretty good about getting it heard fairly quickly, so I would expect within a month.
Is there anybody here that would like to make a statement? Right up. Let's see. And just your name and address for the record, please.
My name's Rich Galemi. I'm at 20 DeSance Drive. A neighbor, obviously, right next to Juliet. First, I want to say that we've tried to make this work. Sorry to see it come to this point. We're taking someone's animal, requesting to take someone's animal away. But the dogs are out constantly. There's almost no day that they are not out, whether it's 2 o'clock in the morning or in the mid-afternoon. I was the one that was walking the dog. We were actually walking the dog on our property with my wife. She was out in front of the gate there with the 2 dogs. So she witnessed the whole thing. They came charging at us and attacked our dog with myself and my wife in between. We kicked them off, and they finally returned to her. We thought that instant would send a little message to them that, something had to be done.
Right.
Right after that, probably for a good 2 2 or 3 weeks, they were out at least every other day, if not every day. And it's just, I can't use my property. My wife won't walk our dog, by herself, because she's scared to death that if they're out, they're gonna come after her. We do have a rooster. I can't let that out, like, periodically for it to be able to get a dust bath, because we never know when their dogs are gonna be out or not. So, I mean, we're limited in using our property, and that's really what it's come down to, is I can't use my own property. And if you just take the dogs away from them and don't stop them from getting new dogs, they will get new dogs. They've already, this is the 3rd set of dogs that they've been through. And with all of them, there's never been any control exercised, no matter what they've done. And that's it. So I think it's important, I guess is what I'm saying, that if there's a possible way to stop them from having more dogs in Foxboro, I mean, that is the ultimate solution. Otherwise, this is just a Band-Aid. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Do we know, that we can do this? Is this, is there a statute for this or anything that if we put that in to the statement that, and they shouldn't own any dogs? I mean,
I don't think you can bar ownership of any, you can't presume the behavior of a future dog, nor the owner, so I don't think you can do anything like that, no. But I would yield to the expert.
I don't know that answer. That's why I had contacted you earlier. I don't, I do know that there has been, the behavior has been ongoing, as Mr. Bellamy stated, with other dogs.
I just don't want to sabotage us doing this, and then it gets to the appeals, they go for the appeal and they throw it out because we have,
Yeah, I don't
something
think
like
it's a
that
risk you
happen.
should take. I mean, I think you should deal with the behavior of the dog and the owner.
Yeah.
As is almost invariably the case in these matters. It's almost never the dog, it's the owner's irresponsible behavior. And in this case, you clearly have owners that are engaging in callous and disrespectful behavior for the neighbors. And unfortunately, the dog is the one that suffers for the human's behavior. So I think the board has to limit itself to an action which restricts the dog from presenting a threat any longer.
Right.
You almost wish you could
Right.
somehow penalize the owner, and I suppose losing their pet is a penalty. But I think you have to limit yourself to that.
To
The
the
statute is
3
fairly
dogs,
clear
and
that
that's
that's all the authority it gives the board.
Yeah. Is there anybody else who'd like to be heard? Sure, come up, Rich, only because the microphone doesn't reach out there.
I hear what you're saying. There's got to be another solution, because you might as well not bother taking the dogs away from them. It's not going to do any good. This is the 3rd set of dogs that they've had, and the same situation has happened with people. Now, I don't know what you can legally do, but I'm just
Right,
telling you,
that's
the
the-
reality is that no matter what you do, it's not going to stop this from happening unless they cannot have dogs, because they've proven they cannot handle the animal.
Sure.
And I don't know if there's anything in the licensing laws that says they won't give a license to it. No.
I can assure the board, there is unfortunately no authority you possess in Chapter 140 that gives you the right to declare an owner unsuitable and bar them from ever owning a dog. You have no authority to do it. A judge can. I don't know if a judge can do that during the appeal process. Never heard of it, but I suppose all things are possible. But I know you don't have the authority to do it. I know you don't.
In your experience, Sue, has that ever come up in any of the appeals that you've been part of?
I have limited experience, and I would have to contact other towns to see, but not in my personal experience. It hasn't.
Chief, do you know anything about?
Dogs, no, thank you. But,
Okay.
Given the story that was just related by the neighbor, I will do some research on the potential of criminal harassment, because the person's absolute disregard of controlling her animals has created a harassment that restricts neighbors from enjoying their rights as individuals, and perhaps we could, if we had a criminal harassment order based on the woman's disregard of controlling her animals, then a violation does become a criminal offense, and it puts it on her to control her dogs. But I have to do some research on that
Okay.
tomorrow.
All right,
And then I could, confer
Yeah, so-
with Mrs. Thibodeau, just
Right.
to see where we could go.
okay. Thanks, Rich.
Thank you.
So at this point, to get the neighborhood safe from them, I think we should probably act on this tonight. At least on the banishment of the 3 animals, correct?
I think that would be a good idea.
Okay. Is there any other discussion on the board? I'd entertain a motion to close the hearing.
I move to close the hearing.
I second.
Any other discussion on closing? All in favor? Aye. 3-0, Pauline. Okay, so,
You can make a motion.
yeah, I think if you're ready.
I'll make a motion that after review of the material submitted this evening and the testimony heard giving evidence to the failure of the previously permanent restraining order, all dogs at the Wang Coombs property shall be removed as expeditiously as possible, in accordance with the Foxboro Animal Control Officer's recommendations or procedures.
Do we need to add the word banishment to that?
Well, it's in compliance with this letter, right? Is this gonna go?
This was how I was recommending,
Yep,
outlining it, and
so,
If I could
for-
suggest, usually, when the board orders a dog to be removed from the limits town, in the old days, the board used to be able to just order that. Unfortunately, what it then ended up happening is vicious dogs would go to another community without warning the community, and it would just keep replicating itself. So a statute was passed that requires towns sending dogs to other places, notify the community, and et cetera. So typically what happens in an order for banishment now is that the board requires that the dog be placed in a permanently protected environment where it not have contact with other animals or humans, to the satisfaction of the animal control officer. Now, there's a bunch of different ways they can do that. No-kill shelters, a common way, we were chatting about that before the meeting. Having the dog adopted by somebody who's got a big farm or something where the dog can run around and have a life of, not contact with other people. But it's got to be to the satisfaction of the ACO, whatever it is. And that's the ACO both in this town and the ACO of the town receiving the animal. And that's my suggestion. Absent anything better, that's my suggestion the board include with the motion.
And I think that's what I did on the last one, because I heard what you were saying, that you would have to notify other towns and other control officers, so,
that,
You're-
what you're suggesting is taking it a step further. Mine said within 24 hours of placement. What you would be recommending is that approval would have to be given in advancement by myself and the receiving town's ACO.
It's a little higher level of responsibility.
Yeah, but all I'm saying is, the way I closed it was in accordance with the Foxborough's Animal Control Officer's procedures. So you define your procedures, you're the expert, you're the,
which is
so, not that I'm dumping it on
referring to
Sue, but,
this, right? That's
Your
what it's
order
saying.
gives the ACO the authority
yeah.
Right,
to do something.
Mhm.
So you make it to her satisfaction, then whatever happens has to be. And if it's not to her satisfaction, she can come back here and ask you to have another hearing and euthanize the animal.
Any other discussion?
Second it?
It needs to be seconded.
Second.
Did you okay. Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye. 3-0, Pauline. Thanks so much, Sue.
Thanks, Sue.
Thanks, Sue.
Okay, and the time being 7:30.
Apologize as you
Oh.
pass that along. It's horrible.
The public hearing on the application for Class 2.
I have a little bit of embarrassing information for the board. Apparently, we had a little bit of a disconnect.
Okay,
As a routine matter, we send the agenda to all the department heads, and the building commissioner noticed this and brought to our attention just today that this Class 2 license first requires a special permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals because it's located in an S1 zoning district. And it's going to require several variances in addition to that from the Board of Appeals before any use can be established on it. Unfortunately, there's no way the office knew that when this application came in. So the board actually cannot act on the application.
It has to go to the zoning board first.
Right. Now, what this did is it underscored for me the fact that we don't have a review process for these. So with the board's blessing, I'm going to write a policy for you and bring it back to another meeting, which requires Class 2 license applications to be circulated to 2 or 3 departments
yeah.
for them to review and comment in writing back to you, so that we don't have this happen again.
Okay.
So sorry about that.
Is anyone here
So
from
do
this
we have
tonight?
other folks here for that? Okay. So it looks like there's more procedures that have to,
Yeah, you
happen.
cannot act on the license because were you to approve it or even consider it, you would be taking an action contrary to the town's own zoning bylaw. You would then become a party and you would be creating liability for the town,
right,
which you can't do. So the gentlemen have to go first to the building commissioner, get a hearing set up, and there's gonna be unfortunately quite a few hurdles to cross on this property.
because of
The
the
first step
zoning.
is to go to the zoning board of appeals?
Yes. No, well, building commissioner, and he'll guide you through the process with the ZBA, right?
And there's a series of hurdles.
Yeah, well, you're gonna need apparently multiple variances, and I don't know which ones they are. Could be side lot setback, front yard setback, could be dimensional requirements, I'm not sure. And then on top of that, you're gonna need a special permit with the planning board, because that's an
It's a
additional
building there,
permit.
though.
What's that?
It's a building there already on the promise.
Yeah, it's
I don't
not
know
the
what the
building, it's the
setbacks-
use.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with the fact that it has to
It's
do
the
with whatever the
zoning.
parameters are for that use.
And I do apologize to you gentlemen that
Okay.
my office didn't know, but there's no way we would know this in here. And absent the review process, which we clearly have to have.
Right.
Unfortunately, what happened is it got on the agenda,
Sure.
then the department heads all hear about it. Building commissioner came in with that memo and said, wait a minute, you guys can't do this. It's gotta go to the
So the
ZBA.
first stop is to the building department to find out what those parameters are and what those variances are. that are
Exactly.
considered.
And then he'll guide you through that, you have your hearing, and if you're successful, getting the variances and the special permit, then you could come back here, no problem. And of course, we will rebate any fee that you pay, don't worry about it.
I understand.
Okay. All right.
Sorry
We'll
about
do
that.
That's okay. Thank you.
Apologies
We'll see
again.
you again.
Kevin, I've only been here since May, but I think this is the second time something like this has come in front, at least since I've been here, so
Yeah.
you might want to look back. I think it was July. There
Mhm.
was another applicant that went through the same thing. and it didn't
It's
get-
pretty easy to
didn't get
see
caught in
why
the
it
system.
happens, because we don't have a review
Yeah,
process.
that's-
But there's other things that could happen too. We've adopted the statute here that says that we don't grant licenses or renewals unless all taxes are paid. So if you don't have the CFO review these applications, you could accidentally issue a license and vary it with our own statute we adopted. Class 2 licenses should be reviewed by the police chief as well.
Yep.
Because, as the chief knows, you know, there's all sorts of things that can happen with Class 2 licenses. So he should require the applicant, and it's in the statute, you can require a query check of the applicant. And that's something the chief should be doing, to be sure that the holder of the Class 2 has never been engaged in any criminal activity as a consequence of having a license, because that's very common. Fire chief should review it, to be sure that the premises on which it's going to be operated are properly equipped.
Right.
And the planner,
And-
town planner,
yeah.
and building commissioner, both to ensure zoning. So, good news is, I've got a policy sitting in my computer at home from other past history, and I'll whip it right out for you, and then the board can look and tweak it the way you'd like.
Great, thank you. Okay, we'll move on to action items. First, the minutes from November 9th. I didn't have anything, did you folks?
I went through them, I thought they looked very nice, Pauline.
Then I would,
I-
you all set, you have something?
I actually wanted to make some additions, but I wanted to be able to discuss it with Larry here, so could we defer these to
Sure.
the next
Can we
meeting?
table this to the next meeting, Kevin? Okay.
That was the minutes, right?
Yes.
Okay.
The Labor Council services for September through October.
This is the Collins,
Yep. Okay, Harlequin. Entertain a motion.
Motion
for
to
town
approve the invoice in the amount of $8,833.75 for Collins, Lockwood, and Pelican invoice.
discussion.
Yep,
Kevin, these are bills that come in on hour, half-hour increments, and they all add up. We're not here on a day-to-day, obviously, sitting in on these meetings. When we get this at our table, I assume it's gone through your office, you've looked at it, you've cross-referenced it with all the, there's about a dozen different parties on this bill, and everything's signed off.
I would tell you this at this point, the Labor Council bills, I can attest to the accuracy of, because these are all issues in which I'm very much engaged. The town council bills, I can't give you that assurance yet, because I don't really understand quite how the retainer versus other services business works. So I can't really give you that satisfaction, because I just haven't had time to
Okay.
get up to speed on that. I don't have any reason to think there's any issue here. And I can tell you that some of this, I've been involved in, and certainly can speak to it. Other issues, I don't know what they're about.
You're talking about the other bills, but specifically the labor ones, you're okay
Yeah,
with
the
this?
labor ones, he's working with me on every one of these matters.
Okay. I'll second Lorraine's motion.
any other discussion? All in favor? Aye. And next we have town council for services rendered in October. Town council.
I think these are the bills that are a little gray. It's been the hot topic of late of who asked for the services, who knows about it, and all that stuff. We had talked about at the last meeting of getting some type of a policy, whether it's, and I think you were gonna start looking at that, so we understand when we get these bills.
Turns out you have one. We're just not following it. So, and I wasn't gonna say that publicly.
No, I'd rather hear it.
So, when I saw that, I said, oh, well, no point rewriting it. So I think probably what we need to do is get that policy in front of the board fairly quickly. Your next meeting, you're gonna be really buried with goals and objectives in the warrant. But maybe a meeting after that, you can take a look. I'm told by Sandra that you've got quite a few policies. They haven't been looked at by the board in a long, long time. And I think it's probably important for the current board to go through them and make sure that you're satisfied with them, that they still make sense. There's a second issue, which,
A special meeting or something for that, Kevin, instead of putting it on
Yeah,
our agenda.
you probably
we just
should, because you've
have
got a lot, and
a
it would take some
Saturday
time. Yeah,
morning
Yep.
overview or something.
Yep.
And we could do it live, but
You have a second issue, which which is this retainer agreement. And I don't know what discussion you had about it, but it's now come up 2 or 3 times, which is, well, what is retainer, what's covered by the retainer, and what's outside the retainer? Town council is clearly making his decision, and I don't have any reason to necessarily dispute that. But by the same token, the board has expressed this concern now 2 or 3 times. I think you really need to have town council come in and have a discussion with them, so you have a better feeling when you look at these bills. Okay, we understand that's the retainer, these things aren't. I wouldn't be the slightest bit concerned about, are these services being rendered? Yeah, they are.
Yep.
It's really a matter of, when something crosses over to general real estate matters. Now, I would not have presumed that real estate was outside of the retainer, but there's probably something in the retainer agreement that says that.
Yeah.
There you go. So I think you need to have that discussion with town council and satisfy yourselves this is the way you want to go forward. Now, you do have a contract in place, or an agreement at least, through June 30th, so I think you own this. I do have some very strong feelings going forward that you need, I think we need to change the way you do the billings. I'm going to recommend to you put it on a straight hourly basis. All matters. I can't really control a legal budget for you when it's done like this, because I don't know when somebody asks for legal help, is it retainer, is it outside? I mean, and trying to individually track all these different matters going, I can't do that. There's just no way I've got time. But if it's a straight hourly basis, and each one of them has a approval slip connected with it, then it's a pretty easy thing to look at the business, look at the approval slip, and know right away, okay, that's been approved, or, wait a minute, there's no approval slip. How did that get worked on? Pretty simple matter. And I've done that in the past very successfully. And councils are great. Once they understand you really mean business, no permission slip, they don't work on it. And the way they find out you mean business is you say, I'm not paying that.
Right.
Because you were told, you don't have the approval, you don't work on it. Then they're great. They become the policeman, and that's really helpful.
Yes.
And the third twist to that, when I see a bill that's attributed to Leo Potter, I'm not disputing the bill, but there's a water and sewer enterprise.
That goes straight to Water Sewer Enterprise, and they pay it.
Even though it's on our bill right now.
Yep, that's paid out of the enterprise fund. So, there again, we don't tend, my understanding is we don't tend to approve or disapprove those. We just kind of give them blanket access. If they feel they need it, they go, because they're paying for it. I'm not sure that's a good policy.
It seems odd to me that,
Well, what you don't-
we're
frankly,
approving
what
a
you-
bill for somebody else's efforts.
Well, frankly, what you don't want is the town's lawyer being used by anybody without your knowledge. I mean, a department can take you down some sort of a path of litigation that could end up costing a lot of money that you're not prepared to support. And so that's why you tend to guard, you have a gatekeeper for town council, and you keep that pretty zealously guarded. A lot of bad things can happen when you just let anybody call town council. We've got a pretty loosey-goosey policy going on right now. And
Well,
it
is it a
needs-
loosey-goosey policy, or,
Well,
loosey
no, the
process?
policy's pretty clear.
okay, so I think that's what we gotta sit down and
It's the execution of it
understand.
that's not very good.
Now, I have, the policy that is in place, did that come in effect with the new town council, or is it in effect for years with the old town council? So I'm wondering if the new town
Yeah,
council
it's
has
always,
seen it.
yeah.
Is it?
It's pretty much always been the case that,
Okay, so the new council they're not new anymore, but these guys might not even have seen it, maybe? I don't know. it's worth getting together, whether it's a separate meeting or.
Yeah, I think, just to go over
Yeah, we're
some
gonna-
of these procedures.
We're gonna have copies of that policy book made and given to the board.
Okay,
And then I think a workshop Saturday morning or
Yep.
whatever is a great idea.
okay. So when they get back, the other two, we can schedule something for a workshop. In the meantime,
Well, I'd recommend you pay the bill. It's $800 and, $1,200, and I don't
Yep.
I don't dispute anything on here.
So, motion to approve the invoice for $1,205 and $1,042.80 is what's due, it says on the bottom.
$1,205.14.
we have
Penciled in, $1,042.80 due.
1042.80. Oh, yeah,
Oh.
because they're taking out that water
The water.
department
Yeah,
stuff. That's why it's,
yeah, I'm assuming you
It's
have to approve the
1042.80.
1205.14 because
it's
you're
going to the
approving it,
water.
they're
We're-
paying
Okay,
it.
Right.
so, motion to approve $1,205.14 for the invoice from Deutsche Williams,
I'll second that.
legal services for October 2010.
Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye. Next, we have a $120 donation from Wendy and James Allen to the animal control gifts, as well as Thomas
Lopolito.
Lopolito and Robbie Lucas for $45.
Where'd you get that one from?
That was a
Oh,
cash
that's-
donation.
Cash
Oh,
donation,
cash, okay.
45.
So, motion to accept with gratitude $120 donation from Wendy and James Allen, $65 from Thomas Lopolito, and $45 from Robbie Lucas to the Animal Control Gift Fund.
With thanks, and I'll second that.
Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye. Next is a request for caroling on the Common for the Foxboro J.C.'s to be held on December 16th. We didn't have anything else on the calendar for that, Kevin?
I'm sorry?
Anything else on the calendar for the Common to
Nope.
be used the 16th?
Nope.
Just to let everybody know, I am a member of the Foxboro J.C.'s, but I do not sit on the board to make any decisions, so.
And Chief O'Leary, you've already looked at this and said there's no problem?
Marked it
Yep.
up, so.
Okay, I'll make a motion to grant the public event application for the J.C.'s for December 16th for their annual Christmas carols sung by the community at the Foxborough Common.
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye. Thank you. We have 4 hacky license applications. First one is for Shy Edward Maloon. These have all been looked at by Deputy Chief Chandler and signed off on, so everybody knows. I think we should probably do them one at a time, though.
But I'll make a motion to approve the hacky license application, reference as number 9 to Shy Edward Maloon.
Second.
Any other discussion? It's for 2 years. Pauline? Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye.
And I'll make a motion to approve the Hackey's license application, reference as number 8, from Stephen Michael McKinley.
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye.
And I'd like to make a motion, the last 2 are new. This is a renewal for the Hackey license application for Donald Eugene Marco.
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye.
And lastly, I'd like to recommend the Hackey license application renewal for Kevin Michael Davis.
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye. Thank you. Next is a one-day all alcohol license for possible Patriots playoff game days in January for 2 in 2011. This is first and goal. We've done this before for him. And you see, the application comes in and it's added days in case
Yep.
there's a playoff opportunity.
And it's pretty detailed. It is a nonprofit, which
Yes,
I was
it is. Yep.
surprised. They are TIPS trained.
Yep.
TIPS certified.
Mhm.
The letter is pretty thorough. The application says for January 2nd, 2011, plus regular season Patriot home dates for 2011 to be determined, but it does not say for the playoff games, but the letter says to the playoff games. So I think if we approve this application, they're not going to get the playoff games.
It would be,
See what I'm saying?
these, January, well, January 2nd.
All of the
January 8th.
licenses have the dates for the playoffs, so.
January 5th.
Yeah, the reason you don't have the dates on for play is because we don't know the dates.
Right, so,
So you'd be in a
They're on here,
position of
okay.
approving licenses for unknown dates, which.
Oh, and I
we didn't-
understand that, but what they're saying in their letter in the as a backup, they want the regular season plus the playoffs, but they don't know the dates. But in their application, they specifically say regular season Pat's home dates for 2011, but they don't indicate the playoff games. Playoff games are not the regular season. So
That's what we're saying. If the Patriots go into the playoffs, they'll have to come back to you with another application, once they know the dates.
because we have them here just to sign them for
Well,
all these different dates, right?
The reason being, we don't know what else is going on those dates that might influence your decision. I mean,
Okay.
We
I
don't-
think last year
we can't,
was one-stop
you can't
shopping. I
really
think they-
process a one-day application without knowing the day. That's the problem. Now, the regular season games will all occur on a date specific, when the schedule's announced, so we'll know the dates, and we can fill them in on the licenses, but
Oh, and I know what you're saying, and that's my point. In the letter, they say we want the season plus the postseason, the playoff games. Can you give us that permit? And we're saying that's not what they asked for in the permit. So if we're sending this back
it's
with an
because
approval.
we told them they can't.
Okay.
In other words, they wanted to get the playoff games. We said, what are the dates? They said, who knows? And we said, well, you can't ask for a one-day beer and wine without knowing the date you're asking for. I mean, it's right in
Right.
the statute. You've got to specify the date. So it's, it's a little bit of a catch-22.
Yeah,
And we feel bad, but what we told them is, as soon as the postseason schedule gets announced, you want to fill them out prospectively in the hope that the Patriots go deep into the playoffs. Sure, we could put that in front of the
so we
board.
put all the, basically, we took all
And Fred, by the
Saturday
way,
and
was fine.
Sundays.
Fred was fine by that. He said, yeah,
Okay.
okay, I understand.
All right, so we took all January, Saturday, and Sundays and put them down here,
Yeah.
made up licenses for them. I get it. Okay.
Okay.
So I'd entertain a motion to approve the one-day license for possible playoff games during January 2011. Right? Is that how it is? It isn't how it is.
January 2nd and regular season Pat's home days for 2011.
Right, not the playoff.
Not the playoff.
Not the
You're saying
playoff.
playoff, but
These dates at the end have to come off. We don't sign these.
We're not gonna
No.
sign
We're
that?
not gonna sign
Nope.
these. Okay.
You don't have to do it because we've got to make the licenses up once we get the dates.
Okay. So the motion is to approve a one-day all alcoholic liquor license application for January 2nd, 2011, and the regular season Pat's home dates for 2011.
Right.
Okay.
As soon as we know something about the playoffs, they'll be back in if they decide they want to do this
Okay.
for the playoffs.
okay. Understood. I'll second that motion.
Any other discussion so we're clear? Got it, Pauline? Yeah, okay. All in favor? Aye.
The board appointed the folks to the Agricultural Commission, but unfortunately, my bad, I forgot to tell you, you've got to decide who goes into what office, because when we do the appointment slip, there's 2 3-year terms, 2 2-year terms, and 1 1-year term. And we've got to do an appointment slip so we know who's expiring, whose term is expiring when. We can't do that because the board didn't specify. So,
What comes first, the chicken or the egg? We get the
well, you've
people.
appointed them all, so you've done that, but now you've got to say who's in what term.
And all the people that came on paper did not specify if they want which term, so it's,
No.
is it a coin toss, or is it worth going back to them and saying,
Right.
do you
That's what I
want
wondered.
a 1-year term, a 3-year term?
We could if you like. I mean, it's no big deal.
I think rather than just assigning them to different durations, maybe give them the choice. Unless there's a knockdown deadline on this, we have to, I'd rather have them tell us how long they want to serve.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, we can do that.
So can we reach out? Probably Ed Lawton was probably the most vocal.
Yeah, I think so. I
So-
think
You
if
know
we
what we'll
ask
do?
Ed or
We'll
or
call
John.
Ed, and we'll say, Ed, you call them and tell us.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then we'll put this on the next agenda
Sure.
for, go through that quickly.
Okay, next is, a request to waive, the Super Bowls to be held at Gillette Stadium, the fee for it. This is something that we've done for the past, few years. The MIAA. This is where they hold their, local Super Bowl for the town's football teams. And we all know that the MIAA supports our local and statewide teams, so let's have a conversation about everybody's feelings about this.
I had consulted Randy about it, and I know he shared his information with Kevin. Kevin, do you want to explain?
Sure. Part of the stadium agreement, we get $2.46 per person for attendance. Irrespective of what the fee is that's charged, that's what the town gets. So for an event like this, we ask, based on past experience, what the potential attendance would be. Fire chief indicates from past experience could be as high as 10,000. Now, we're not saying it will. We're saying it could be that high. Assuming it was that high, then the town's revenue would be $24,600. So what we said was, we think it's likely between 20 and 25, just to kind of bracket it. By waiving the fee, the town is essentially saying that we're going to give that revenue up. Now, here's my take on it. I've given you Randy's recommendation. He's the CFO. He's the money guy. And the money guy should look at things from the money point of view. And the money guy did exactly what I hoped he would do. And he said, why would you give this money up? We're in a difficult economy, tight financial times. This is a substantial part of a salary which is an employee we could potentially retain or not, which represents service to the public. So that's exactly what I would have hoped Randy would say, and he did a good job telling us that. It's my job, and ultimately yours, to look at a broader picture. Now, the broader picture here is there's 2 factors at play. First of all, this is a 501c3 charitable group, so which services student athletes in Foxboro and in virtually all of the cities and towns in the state. And to the extent that you waive the fee, you make it more affordable for the parents of those students to attend these games. Now, you can look at that aspect of it from the point of view of, well, if Foxboro makes a Super Bowl, that's going to be some Foxboro residents. If we don't, then you're giving a ticket price break to lots of other folks who aren't from this community, and we're costing ourselves revenue. So there's an equity question there, do you want to do that? I mean, this is an organization that supports youth sports for the entire state. We happen to be the host community that, where this activity takes place. When this agreement was put in place, I can tell you as a point of fact, no one ever anticipated these kinds of events happening, because the field wasn't of a type. It was a turf field, and grass field, I should say. And because of the wear and tear that the Patriots gave it, you wouldn't have student athletes playing on that field. And it's only because of the installation of the modern turf field that the Patriots are now able to host collegiate games, high school games, et cetera. So, first you have the issue of Maya. To be honest with you, that doesn't compel me, and I would not recommend to you that you waive the fee solely on that basis, because you're basically giving a break to residents of other communities and costing our taxpayers money. And that does not compel me. I would not recommend it to you. But the second question you got to look at is, what does this mean to the Patriots? The Patriots are our business partners. We have currently a business arrangement that we're negotiating with them, and while we can't discuss the exact particulars of it, we can say that is in the tens of millions of dollars that we're talking about, of potential benefit to the taxpayers of this community. And so I contacted Dan Murphy earlier this evening, had a conversation with him, or Dan actually contacted me, and we finally connected, because I wanted to know, frankly, is waiving this fee important to our business partners? I think it is, and I think that is a compelling reason to consider. The Patriots spend an enormous amount of money hosting these events, and the reason they do it is because the Kraft family's made the commitment to youth football to be the venue where these Super Bowl games are played, and what could be a more wonderful thing for kids playing football in high school and their families and to play in Gillette Stadium. There just couldn't be anything better. So they spend a couple $100,000 hosting the events. They sell food in order to recoup some of that, but Dan assures me that the bottom line is a very substantial charitable contribution that the Kraft family makes to the operation of this event. The issue here, they charge about $10 for the price, I guess, $10 and some change. Of that entry fee, MIA, Youth Sports, gets the whole thing. Patriots, Kraft family, businesses don't get any of that. If we charge our $2.46, then it might have the effect, and I'm not saying it will, but I'm saying it might have the effect of retarding the interest in the future of those groups having their event here, because that makes it a fairly pricey event. $10 is fairly expensive. I don't think there's too many schools that charge that. Granted, those venues aren't Gillette Stadium either. And I think the concern is, if the price stays that high, then it may retard attendance. It may even have an effect of having those Super Bowl games played elsewhere, and that would be unfortunate. Patriots like hosting it. This is a wonderful event. They don't frankly get anything out of it in terms of revenue. They give up a lot of revenue. I think they would like to see us as their business partners reciprocate. I will tell you frankly, as a sign of good faith, I would recommend you do this, because I'm looking at a much bigger picture here, not the amount of money we're going to lose, I'm looking at the fact that we are engaged in a very careful, very delicate negotiation. This small amount of money that we give up, A, does a lot of families a lot of good. That's a nice side benefit. B, it says to the Patriots, we really are your business partners. We understand the big picture. We're capable of looking at a small sacrifice, and we're saying to you as our business partners, we hope you will look with favor during those negotiations on the much bigger picture that we're negotiating with you, which is in the tens of millions of dollars. In other words, it's a sign of good faith. It's an investment in a business relationship. I think it's a good one, and so I recommend it to you.
Can I add a couple thoughts?
Sure.
When I got this in the packet, I was a little torn because I knew what MIAA, I didn't know what their mission, I didn't know they were nonprofit. I went back and forth. What I did is I called the director, and I got some education about what they do and how they do it. I called the Patriots, and they told me their history of when they started this, and then I called past selectmen that was voted on in 2007, just so I could understand what was going on. According to the MIAA, it's probably a little higher than what you're saying. I think they're anticipating about 18,000 people. Okay, so the revenue is going to be a little bit more. They represent probably about 375 odd towns. During the regular season, the kids don't pay a fee. Each town pays a fee. And when they have MIAA games, each town can charge a fee, a gate fee or a parking fee. During the tournaments, like the Super Bowl, they're not allowed to, okay? So if this wasn't at the Patriots Stadium, if it was at Foxboro High School, because they always have an area where it's neutral. So say if this was over in Brockton, Brockton would not be able to put a dollar fee or $2 or anything. 100% of that money goes to the MIAA. Out of that money that they get, they'll pay the town their costs, police and fire. Here, in 2007, 2008, and 2009, the Patriots hosted it, and they took care of all the costs. And it's probably close to about 200,000, I was told 180,000 is what their cost is. They pay for all the Foxboro police, they pay for all the Foxboro Fire Department, and on top of that, the town does get an administration fee from that, so the town's getting some revenue. You look at the people that do come to this event, it's the parents, it's the kids, it's the grandparents, it's the cheerleaders, so it's not people from coming out of state to see a concert. It's a very specific clientele that comes. So I wholeheartedly support the waiving of the fee. What I disagree is people saying that, you know, it's taxpayers' money that we're giving up. I don't think it is. It's there. We could do it because of our agreement, but that agreement was more towards concerts and football, big events, not for the kids. I saw the letter from Randy when I got in here, and yes, from a financial perspective, we are going through tough times, and it could be a sizable amount of money, but I honestly don't think it's ours for the taking, because other towns would not be able to do this other than what happened at the stadium. So I think I look at the big picture that, you know, we could make a quick dollar on it, but over the years, it's the community. If one of our biggest private businesses is spending all that money for a community service, and then we're taking from it without giving back, because we're not spending any money to support it, it's just not the right thing to do. So I would be in favor of honoring the request, as they did in 2007, to not have them collect the fee.
One other note I just wanted to mention to the board. When the stadium agreement was written many years ago, it clearly did not anticipate events of this nature. It anticipated events there of a commercial nature. And I think we're absolutely clearly 100% within our rights and should expect to collect a fee for that event, because the impact on this community is enormous, and we should. This is a new kind of event that's happening there because of the advent of the field. I do think that we need to engage in some discussions, and we probably need to make an amendment to that agreement which recognizes that these events are happening, may become more prevalent, and maybe find some middle ground. But until we go through that exercise, then I certainly agree, charging this fee is fairly substantial for, what's a charity event.
And from what I understand, the ticket prices are gonna be a little higher than you had said, 10 to, I think, $13 and $15, because they get parking and a few other things. So it's not cheap, you know, and the money that comes in, you know, when you think of the MIAA, you think of basketball, you think of football, but they also support ski clubs and skating and swimming and all that stuff that runs at a loss. So it's, you know, and they have not raised, I checked, they have not raised the fees in the last 3 years, or the ticket prices, so.
Lorraine?
Yeah, again, I think I take a slightly different view of it. Certainly wholeheartedly appreciate the kindness of the craft group to sponsor the MIAA by providing them with the rent-free agreement. I guess I view slightly differently because the town of Foxboro, I think the gesture is certainly charitable, but we're not in the business of being a charitable organization, unlike the craft organization, which is very charitable. And so I'm looking at it again from the standpoint of with an attendance of 18,000 people, that's, you know, around $45,000 of revenue that, you know, we're constantly looking for revenue streams that can help us meet our bottom line. And I know this year alone we have unanticipated expenses that we'll be looking at having to deal with. So, you know, I think I'm leaning more towards the perspective that Randy's taking in terms of this is certainly an opportunity that is enjoyed by, you know, being hosted by the craft organization. It's a wonderful thing that they're doing. But again, we're in a different boat than they are, and you know, I think I go with the idea that looking at a position, we're asking people to take 0 increases. You know, I just think that passing up this opportunity is really tough from a financial standpoint. You know, I did also look at MIAA, went on to looked at an article written about them. They are a very successful organization, very profitable. I think in the grand scheme of their income, $45,000 is a relatively drop in the bucket compared to what that means to the town of Foxboro. So again, that piece of it also leads me to lean towards not wanting to waive the fee.
Well, you know, I was here in 2007 when we did it for the 3 years, and you know, I'm always a nonprofit-minded person. I know it's tough times. It's tough times for everyone, and if the MIAA does a lot of things for the kids to make it easier, I think, for their parents and the kids themselves. And I feel that, you know, maybe instead of coming here, they're going to go into Boston next year, and we wouldn't have that $28,000 to $40,000 anyway. I'm not comparing it to someone losing their job because we don't have it, but it's, again, it's, to me, it's almost like the whole meals tax thing, you know. Well, we can, so let's just do it, you know. And, you know, I'm not of that mindset. I feel that I feel like we should support the nonprofit group. It's not, you know. And hopefully we'll get a playoff this year, and then we'll have more money, and, you know, maybe, you know, we can convince our friends up at the stadium to throw in another concert next year or something, but to do it from this, I still can't convince myself to do that. I'd rather, you know, see us, yeah, Kev.
Just a suggestion. I was a little bit surprised, frankly, to hear that it might be as much as 18,000, because I wasn't aware of that. The estimate that we had from the fire chief was about 10,000. 25,000 is a number. 40, 50,000, much more significant number, frankly. Just a thought you might want to consider. The request is to waive it for 3 years. As I said, this 246 clearly was not anticipated for this kind of events. We clearly have to have some discussions with the craft organization about this fee, and it clearly needs to be amended, in my opinion. Perhaps you ought to think about waiving it for 1 year to make it clear that everything is fine, waived for this year, and give us time to engage in a dialogue with them well before next year, so that we can consider whether there's a middle ground. I mean, I'm not trying to suggest to you, if the board feels strongly that waiving the fee is the right way to go, touche. But in as much as I think some discussion needs to take place here, and perhaps even some negotiation, maybe it ought not to be for 3 full years, in order to give us some time to get this into some further discussion. You know, if it's 18,000 and it's going to grow, and we're talking about 40 or 50,000 this year and a big number next year and an even bigger number the year after, I'm not saying we need to recoup all that, but maybe we want to think about whether we want to waive it entirely. So,
I think that's a great idea.
I just, you know, when something like this happens and it's unanticipated, I think you got to have some discussion about it. I mean, we've got a combination of trying to be supportive to our business partner and to families, and at the same time, trying to run a business, you know, and at the end of the day, a government is a business. And, you know, I think maybe there's some middle ground here. If we give it up for 3 years, and we've given up the opportunity for that middle ground for 3 years, if we do it for 1 year, you can come right back if you want, and you can give a 2 more year waiver, if that's your will. But at least lets us get the discussion on the table, and I think that might end up being a prudent thing. That, by the way, was not so much a recommendation as it was a thought out loud.
Yeah, no,
I'm just chewing on it right now. I'm just chewing on that.
I remember, was it 2 years ago, the NCAA played, which is a not-for-profit. It's a profitable agency.
Yeah.
And I remember they came to town, to Selectmen's with a check, and it was almost the Selectmen saying, "What's the check for?" I said, "Well, we had an NCAA tournament here." Traffic wasn't going through town. You almost didn't know that they were there. It was for 3 days, and it was hundreds of thousands of dollars, from my recollection, that they came in. Something like that, you know, again, it didn't cost the town money. It was something that it wasn't a concert, it wasn't a football game, and it was kind of icing on the cake, and so it was nice to get that. I just, you know, for the kids, if we're looking at it as a lost opportunity, I challenge that. It's by going along with the waiver, I would say it's creating an opportunity in the big picture versus giving up an opportunity. And honestly, I don't think it's ours to take, because none of the other towns do it. Not one single town charges for the MIAA Super Bowl. They're not allowed to. So we'd be an anomaly, and it's not the right message. If you know, the middle road is we do it for 1 year or 2 years, I could support that. But you know, if this was voting for the fee, I wouldn't support it tonight.
I think that $300,000 from that scenario that you were describing actually was from the craft organization. It was not from NCAA.
It was because
Because
of
of the-
that, but what we had done was we had waived the fee,
Okay.
and then the stadium came to us in good faith. And
It's like,
So
we
the-
didn't waive the fee. There was no fee because it wasn't
Well,
part of the original agreement.
yeah, it was
to
one
have
of those
Okay,
funky
so
things like
Right.
this.
Okay. I mean, at the end of the day, whether it came from someone paying the ticket fee and going to the crafts and coming to us, or what have you, that money came unannounced. And
Right.
it was a nice thing, and that's the opportunity that I'm seeing. Yeah, obviously, I'm not as familiar as you guys were with that, but the Crafts did not have to do that.
No, they didn't.
Right, right.
And that's something that they volunteered to do.
But I
And-
think that's what Kevin is getting to in terms of sitting down and having a dialogue with them about this as like a similar type of situation to that.
Yeah, well, it's just, I guess this is a major policy decision that the board is making. 18,000 people and likely to grow, we're talking about a substantial amount of money. And I guess I'm sort of concerned that a decision of that magnitude be made almost as a happenstance. Up until, I don't know whether it was yesterday afternoon or today, but I had no idea what the order of magnitude of this was. In fact, I'm sorry, I know when it was at 10 o'clock last night when I got home and I read Randy's email and I said, oh, wow, I didn't know this was this much at stake. And the thought that struck me was exactly what you said, Jim. I don't know that we should be making profit on, in a way that's a happenstance. We didn't sit down and say, there's going to be Maya Super Bowls here, let's charge them a fee and make some money for the town. Because our costs are fully covered. Our police and fire officers are covered. So we didn't make that decision. This happened by accident. So I'd like to have the opportunity to have a dialogue with the Patriots and with Maya, for that matter, and determine, what would be appropriate. I mean, a big, important policy decision doesn't get made sort of by accident one night.
Sure.
It gets made after we have a thoughtful process and think about it. And honestly, what I'm thinking is that there's may be some middle ground here, and maybe not. Maybe at the end of the day, when we have a full thought-out dialogue, we say, look, this isn't the way for us to make money. It's not. I don't honestly know, but I do know that making a decision of this magnitude with fragmentary information literally at the last minute is not a good way to do business. I've got this image of, walking in here tomorrow morning and having a whole bunch of angry citizens call up and say, what are you guys, daffy? What were you thinking last night? Which will probably happen anyways because of something else we did.
Something else, yep.
But seriously, decisions like this should be thought out a lot better. And so that's why the sort of idea about doing it for a year or 2 years, and that gives us time to get into a dialogue. I feel acutely the fact that Larry and Paul aren't here, and love to have their thoughts on this too, So that's
So,
just my.
from my understanding, I think that the MIAA has a 3-year contract they signed, so they're gonna be here for the next 3 years. So I'll make a motion to honor the waiving of the ticket fees for the next 2 years. And then on the 3rd year, we'll revisit it. Hopefully in the 2nd year, we'll revisit it, but on the 3rd year, we may or may not vote. So my motion is to honor the waiving of the ticket fee for this upcoming Super Bowl and the next upcoming Super Bowl. Do I hear a second?
No.
I'll
Not yet.
second for discussion.
Larry.
Discussion, yeah.
I will second for discussion.
I think we could, the same thing could be accomplished by waiving it for one and allowing that dialogue to happen. I just feel like, I like the idea that Kevin is stating that, again, this is something that was never foreseen and, but definitely represents a significant financial opportunity to look at with our business partners. So to allow that dialogue to happen, I think, waiving it for the first year gives us the time to have that dialogue, with the craft organization and also Maya. And then at that point, a determination could be made, do you want to extend that waiver for another year? Are we still in the middle of the dialogue? Where,
Okay.
that's the only reason why I didn't second it, that's all.
Understood, okay.
By the way, whichever way the board votes, 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, I would take it as the board's intent that you would like us to get, to not wait, until it's on the eve of 3 years or whatever, but get on with the dialogue, and
Yeah,
come back
that's
to
why
you with a recommendation. And I'm not saying it's the most important priority for next week, but sometime in the next couple months, get into this with folks and come back to you with something.
Okay,
That's why I'm asking to consider a year. really.
okay. So that motion fails? I'll like
No.
a,
No,
Oh.
no.
It hasn't been voted
Oh,
on or
okay.
anything yet. Nobody's amended it.
well, it wasn't seconded.
I did second it.
Oh, you did,
with-
okay.
Yeah, for purpose of discussion, I seconded it. Sorry, Pauline.
Can I make a motion to amend it?
You can move for amendment, yep.
I move to amend the motion to waive the fee for 1 year and enter into dialogue with the craft organization in Maya regarding the Foxboro town user fee for the Super Bowl football. Do I
Okay,
hear
I'll-
a second?
I'll second that motion. I mean, I could do battle and go for 3 years or no years, but I think it's reasonable, and let's work together on that.
Okay.
So I'll second that motion.
Okay, so, is there any more discussion on the amendment? Okay, all in favor of the amendment? Aye, 3-0. And now, the original motion as amended. All in favor? Aye, as amended.
So you're voting now on the motion
Well, you have to
for
go back.
Lorraine's amendment, which is a 1-year waiver and opening a dialogue.
So we all agreed on the amendment,
I think you did.
Oh, so that was, okay,
We
gotcha.
just voted
Okay,
on
so now
that,
you're voting for
and
the,
now you have to vote on the original motion, which was
with the amendment.
with the amendment of the 1 year. So all in favor of that? Aye. Okay, 3-0. Thank you.
Somebody told me once, by the way, it's a really good decision of government if everybody's mad. So this will probably be a great decision tomorrow morning.
You think so?
You know, if people understand it, I understand budget, and it's gonna be a very difficult time, but truly, I think this decision in the big picture
Yeah.
wins out. And I'm looking down the road, the
Well,
way that we're gonna work
I hope
together.
everybody involved in this, Maya, the Patriots, the public, all understands that what the board's trying to do is be thoughtful about this and not jump to a conclusion, but be thoughtful about it and engage people in a discussion. And something good almost always comes out of that.
In worst case, we blame Paul because he's not here and nobody knows anything. I doubt he
Yeah,
watches
Paul
the cable.
or Larry.
Well, Larry, yeah.
Next is, the Norton Board of Selectmen are looking for support to contact our legislatures regarding the defeat of question 2.
I don't know if it's our place to do that. Question 2 was the 40B. It was close, but it got defeated, and the people spoke, and I don't know if it's a place of the selectmen to start going to the state legislation to try to change things right after a vote.
I'm not sure what they're asking you to do, because it says, asking you to help organize a forum at which you can express your suggestions for amendments to the law.
Exactly.
And there's nothing wrong with that, certainly, but that's called the Massachusetts legislature.
Right, and that's what they do. And that's why, I think what they want us to do is do a similar letter to our reps like they have.
So it's
But-
just asking for a forum, it's not
Yeah.
really asking to change anything.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what that means. Have a meeting, I don't know, so, but yeah, you might be right. Send a letter to our legislators and say, consider,
But I think that's,
I'll tell you this,
it's
after
not
the vote,
something I certainly want to vote on.
well, I will
It-
say as a practical matter, when the public acts in this manner on an initiative petition, the legislature's pretty loath to tell the public what to do. And in this case, the expectation by the legislature was that it was gonna pass. That's what they thought would happen.
Yeah.
Everybody was shocked that 40B was preserved So I don't think you're gonna see a lot of movement in light of this vote. Now, I don't think that's a good idea. I wish 40B would get reformed, but I think that's what you're gonna see, so. You know, I do know from conversations with Jay Barrows that he certainly believes very strongly that this needs major reform.
Right.
I haven't had the conversation with Senator Timmerly yet, but most legislators agree it needs reform. They just can't figure out exactly what
Right.
would be better to create affordable housing. And that's, you know, from someone who was involved in what EOCD still says, DHCD still says was the single worst one of its type in the state. So I've seen great ones and I've seen disasters. If they're used properly, they can be a good thing. If they're abused, they're a train wreck.
Right.
So do you see any harm in supporting the creation of a forum, though, just to have these discussions?
No, if you guys want to have a letter, want me to draft a letter for you that's, you know, to Senator Timberley and Representative Barrows, it says that, you know, something along the lines of what Bob Kimball wrote in Norton, that you guys think it needs some attention, you know, I think they'd be grateful to have that, you know, to have a little support for the idea that it does need, everybody agrees it needs attention.
Yeah, but see, to go out, I mean, we're 5 people here, and if we're sitting here representing the town, you know, it's nice for Norton to feel that way, but is there anyone from town coming up and saying, please represent us and do this? You know,
Right, and we don't, I don't even know what the stats were for how our voters went on question 2.
It's a good
I
question.
know I read it,
don't know.
but it's not coming to me right now.
And I know Norton, I mean, they've had some tough 40Bs there. Foxboro has been a little blessed because the 40Bs that we've had, the little I know about it, has not taken advantage of the system. They're
It's-
nice
it was-
40Bs.
It's a beautiful one, frankly. I
Yeah.
toured it. and
Yeah,
it's
so
a
it's worked,
great piece
it's
of
worked
work.
somewhat well for Foxboro.
Yeah.
And I can count the towns that it's been a disaster, and Foxboro hasn't been one of them, so unless the town is, you know, that'd be interesting, go back to the results of our Foxboro polls and see what the turnout was on
Right.
that.
Well, why don't you guys take it under advisement?
Okay.
And I've got a meeting coming up with Jim Purcell, the manager in Norton, I think Monday or Tuesday, and I'll ask him, what are you guys trying to accomplish with this, and report back.
Okay, so those are it. I know we were gonna do we were gonna look at the warrant tonight, but we're not
Well,
even ready to,
You only have 3 of you.
exactly.
However, I know the chief's been very patiently sitting there, because he had a couple articles he wanted to discuss with you. And I don't know if maybe you'd want him to take a few minutes to do that.
You know, that's up, you know, to the pleasure of the board. If indeed it's prudent, and you're gonna have to discuss the entire warrant at a later time. I have no problem coming back at that time and discussing it. I think there was one, that I spoke briefly, Mr. Pecos on, concerning the age change, that might be confusing because we actually tried to pass it 2 years ago, in 2008. Unfortunately, due to a personal matter, I wasn't at town meeting,
Right,
and town council at that time seemed to confuse the voters more about what the thought process was.
Yep.
So I'm more than willing to come back at your next meeting just to talk about that so that the full board would be available.
yeah.
Kevin, what's the big picture of, I went to the advisory committee with you on Wednesday, and I thought we had said, or you had said, the warrants are gonna come to the selectmen tonight, and then they're gonna go to the advisory committee the day after.
Yeah.
Is this gonna slow down
What I
process?
what I told them was that as soon as you guys went through this, which we expected was gonna be tonight, because we expected we would know what's going on with the deal with the Patriots, and we could then pick a date for the meeting, because the 2 articles that are blank in here are the 2 dealing with the Patriots. Since we don't know yet what's happening there, and that's driving this whole meeting, there's obviously no point picking the date tonight, which means the pressure is off with respect to having to Well, what you folks have to do is you have to look at this list of articles, and you have to say, okay, this one's in, this one's out, this one's in, this one's out. It's your warrant. But you don't have to do that tonight, because we can't pick a date, because the main thing driving it, we don't know when it's gonna happen.
Right.
So, what I
If
can
it's
do
not
is I can
worth
send this
having a
on to the
special meeting.
AdCom as a potential warrant,
Okay.
and there won't be more articles in this, but there could be less.
So you could forward this to the AdCom, they can start their liaisons and
start.
working on it.
Yep.
And if it gets pulled, it gets pulled, but at least they've got a heads up on the stuff that's in here.
We'll do
Now, are
that.
we past the point where it's a go or no-go for a special town meeting?
No, I would say, you're looking at, not the statutory requirement, 14 days, but posting requirement, but the practical one, which is 6 or 7 or 8 weeks. So from the date you close a warrant and say, that's the warrant.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, I'm not talking about the dates, we can work through that, but is there enough substance in here to warrant the special town meeting, or do we put it off for next year?
Without
Not without
The-
the stadium stuff.
the deal with the Patriots, I
Mhm.
would say no. You don't, I don't, I don't think we've got enough in here to get a quorum. I mean, you know what brings folks out better than I do by far, but as I'm just looking at this, I'm saying, gee, is this enough to get a quorum of people to come out? There's not a big barn burner of a controversial thing in here, so.
The caveat, if you've got a dozen and a half things, they might in itself not be important, but when you tack this onto the stuff that's coming in the
Here's my
Springtown
concern,
meeting, it's gonna
if
be
we
at 2
don't
o'clock in the
have,
morning.
if we don't have the special, all this stuff is coming back for the annual,
That's what I'm
plus all
concerned
the
about.
stuff for the annual, we could have a mega warrant.
Yeah, and I know that the advisory committee's concerned about that. They're overloaded, and it's a very late night in the
I'd
spring.
recommend you wait a little more.
Okay.
There's no harm in waiting a little. Right now, if you could decide tonight, we could go the end of January pretty easily. But if we waited anywhere from another 2 to 4 weeks, and you're into February, you're still fine. Once you get into March, I'd say, well, do we need to bother, because the annual is only 7 or 8 weeks away. But we've still got another 3 or 4 weeks when you'd have enough separation between the special and the annual to justify it.
Okay.
And I'm hoping that in that time, we can get something pulled together on the other issue.
Great. Okay.
Okay, so that's it for tonight. I'd like to wish Foxboro a very happy Thanksgiving. Go Patriots, go Warriors. And I'd entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to close the,
I'm not gonna second
public meeting.
Second.
Any other discussions? All in favor? Aye. Thanks, everyone.
Have a good Thanksgiving, everyone.